You're not getting a single cent of my money." "Nothing," Rebecca screamed at me with a cruelty that chilled my blood. We had just arrived from my husband Victor's funeral, and my daughter had already completely changed. Her eyes were shining with a greed I had never seen before. "The $300 million are mine now, Mother," she continued, waving the will in my face. "It's all mine. And you're irrelevant here." 12 hours. Only 12 hours had passed since we buried the love of my life, and my own daughter was kicking me out of the home we had built together over 40 years of marriage. "Rebecca, please," I whispered, still dressed in black, my makeup smudged from tears. "We just buried your father. How can you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" She laughed with contempt. "You know what's cruel, Mother? That for all these years you've lived like a parasite off of Dad's money. But those days are over. This house is mine. The money is mine. And you are surplus to requirements." The lawyer, Arthur, cleared his throat uncomfortably from the corner of the living room. He had been the one to read the will that morning, confirming that Victor had left his entire fortune to our only daughter. But something in his eyes told me there was more to it than that. "You have 24 hours to leave," Rebecca declared, pacing the room like a conqueror, "and don't you dare bother me again. You are not my responsibility. For 40 years you lived off of Dad, but now you're going to learn what it's like to actually work." My hands trembled, not with fear, but with an indignation that was growing like a fire in my chest. This was the little girl I had held in my arms, the one I had taught to walk, the one I had comforted through every nightmare. "You did at least read the entire will," Arthur murmured suddenly, and something in his tone made Rebecca stop in her tracks. "What's that supposed to mean?" my daughter snapped. But for the first time since the reading, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Arthur exchanged a look with me, and I knew exactly what he was referring to. An almost imperceptible smile touched my lips as I watched Rebecca's face begin to pale. Nothing important," the lawyer replied, but his smirk said otherwise. "I suppose you'll find out eventually." Rebecca stalked towards me. "I don't care what that paper says. The money is mine, this house is mine, and you are leaving right now." She pushed me toward the door with such force that I almost lost my balance. "And you know what else? I don't want to see you at anyone else's funeral either. As of today, you are dead to me." The slam of the door echoed through the house like a gunshot. I stood in the yard, under the light rain that had started to fall, looking at the house where I had been happy for 4 decades. The windows we had chosen together, the garden we had planted, the memories that were now turning to ash. I walked slowly toward my car, each step feeling like I was carrying stones in my shoes. My black dress was getting soaked, but I didn't care. The cold of the rain was nothing compared to the ice I felt in my heart. Arthur came running after me. "Mrs. Marta, please wait," he called out, approaching with a folder under his arm. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I looked into his eyes and saw something that calmed me. Complicity, knowledge. The same expression I had seen on Victor's face when he had an ace up his sleeve. "Is this about what I think it is?" I asked in a low voice. He nodded gravely. "Your husband was smarter than Rebecca can possibly imagine, and you need to know the whole truth before it's too late." I got into the car with Arthur, and as we drove away from the house, I saw Rebecca spying from the main living room window. Her expression had changed. It was no longer triumphant. It was worried, because she didn't know what I was about to discover. Arthur drove me to his office in silence. During the drive, my mind drifted between disbelief and a dull rage that was growing in my chest like a wildfire. 40 years. 40 years of marriage to Victor, of building not just a fortune together, but a family. And now my own daughter had thrown me out as if I were a stranger. "Please sit, Marta," Arthur said once we arrived at his office. His eyes reflected a mixture of pity and something else, something that looked like hope. I sank into the leather chair in front of his desk, the same place where Victor and I had signed our wills years ago. The walls were lined with diplomas and Arthur's family photos, reminding me of everything I had just lost. "Marta, there's something Rebecca doesn't know," he began, opening the folder he had brought from the car. "Your husband was an extraordinarily forward-thinking man, and he knew his daughter's character very well. I pulled a handkerchief from my purse and dried the tears that wouldn't stop flowing. Arthur, please. I've already lost my husband, now I've lost my daughter. Don't give me false hope. This isn't false hope, Marta. It's legal fact. He spread several documents across the desk. Do you remember when Victor insisted we all meet alone 6 months ago? Without Rebecca? I nodded slowly. Victor had been very specific about that meeting. He said he had private matters to discuss, things that concerned only us as a married couple. That day, your husband prepared an addendum to his will. A very specific clause that would only be activated under certain circumstances. Arthur pointed to a paragraph in one of the documents. If Rebecca demonstrated extreme cruelty towards you, especially during the period of mourning, the entire inheritance would automatically revert to you. My heart stopped for a moment. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband knew exactly what kind of person your daughter was, and he made sure to protect you. Arthur smiled for the first time all day. The $300 million, the house, the properties, the investments, it all becomes yours again, if we can prove that Rebecca met the conditions of the clause. The taste of my tears changed. They were no longer tears of sadness, but of an emotion I couldn't define. Relief, perhaps, or justice. And how do we prove that? I asked, my voice trembling. Arthur took out his phone and showed it to me. On the screen, a recording app was clearly active. I recorded the entire conversation this afternoon. Every cruel word, every insult, every moment she threw you out of the house where you had just held awake for your husband. I put my hands to my face and cried. But now I was crying with gratitude for Victor, my dear Victor, who was still taking care of me, even from beyond the grave. There's more, Arthur continued. Your husband also left very specific instructions. You must allow Rebecca to believe she is in control for a while. You must let her make mistakes. Let her show her true character to the world. Only then can we activate the clause permanently. You mean I have to keep pretending that I'm broke? Exactly. Your husband knew your daughter better than anyone. He knew that power would corrupt her quickly and that you would need time to decide if you truly wanted to take everything back, or if you preferred to give Rebecca one last chance. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city carried on at its normal pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding in our lives. I thought of Victor, of how he had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else in business. Apparently, he had also been 3 steps ahead in protecting his family. What do I have to do now? I asked, without turning around. Go to a modest hotel. Act as if you've truly lost everything. I will monitor Rebecca's actions. According to your husband's instructions, she will show her true colors very soon. And what if she doesn't? What if she's really changed and this was just a reaction to her grief? Arthur came over and placed a fatherly hand on my shoulder. Marta, with all due respect, you and I both know that's not going to happen. Rebecca showed who she really is today. Your husband knew it, and that's why he prepared all of this. I took the documents and carefully placed them in my purse. How much time do I have? The clause can be activated at any time within the next 6 months. But your husband suggested waiting at least 30 days to see the full pattern of Rebecca's behavior. We left the office after the sun had set. Arthur drove me to a discreet hotel in the center of the city, a place I never would have considered in my previous life, but which would now become my temporary home. One more thing, Marta, he said before leaving. Your husband left a letter for you, with instructions to give it to you only after Rebecca had shown her true character. He took a sealed envelope from his briefcase. I believe the time has come. I was left alone in that small, modest room, with the envelope in my trembling hands. On the front, written in Victor's familiar hand, was my name. For my dearest Marta, the strongest woman I know. My hands trembled as I broke the envelope's seal. Victor's handwriting was unmistakable, that elegant script I had admired for 40 years of marriage. I sat on the hotel bed and, under the dim light of the nightstand lamp, began to read the letter my husband had written for this exact moment. My dearest Marta, if you are reading this, it means that Rebecca has shown her true colors and that my plan is unfolding as I expected. Forgive me for not telling you everything while I was alive, but I needed your reaction to be genuine so that she would fully believe in her victory. Tears began to roll down my cheeks as I continued reading. Over the last few years, I have watched our daughter become increasingly greedy and cruel. Remember when she fired Mr. Rossi, our gardener, just because he asked for a small raise after 20 years of loyal service? Or when she refused to help her cousin Angelica when she lost her job? I have seen how she treats the household staff, how she talks about people with less money than us. I paused my reading and looked out the window of the room. Victor had indeed seen what I had refused to accept for years. Our daughter had become a person we didn't recognize. But there is something else you must know, my love. The $300 million that appear in the official will is not our entire fortune. There are additional accounts, properties registered in your name, investments that only you and I know about. The real total of our estate is $450 million. My heart stopped. $450 million. Victor had been even more astute than I imagined. The additional accounts are at the First National Bank, downtown branch, under your maiden name, Marta Celestina Vasquez. The password is the date of our first kiss, May 15th, 1985. Arthur has all the necessary documents, but he will only give them to you when you are ready to take full control. I continued reading, and each line revealed how deeply Victor had planned for this situation. Your task now is to observe. Let Rebecca believe she has everything, and you will see how absolute power corrupts absolutely. She will spend, she will squander, and she will show her true character to the world. When the time comes for you to reveal yourself as the true heir, she will have already learned the value of humility in the hardest way possible. But remember, my love, the goal is not to punish her, but to save her. Our daughter has lost her way, but there is still time for her to find her true heart. Only through loss can she appreciate what truly matters. The letter went on with specific instructions. Victor had prepared every last detail, including contacts of trusted friends who would help me during this transition period, and a step-by-step plan to recover not only my fortune but also, he hoped, our daughter. I trust you to make the right decisions at the right time. You are the wisest and most compassionate woman I know, and I know you will find a way to turn this tragedy into an opportunity for growth for our entire family. At the end of the letter, there was a postscript that made me smile through my tears. P.S. At the bank, you will also find an additional surprise. Our old friend Tobias has been discreetly managing some tech investments that aren't even included in the main calculations. Let's just say our real net worth might be even higher than you imagine. I love you eternally, Victor. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse alongside the legal documents. My mind began to process all the information. Victor had not only protected me financially, but he had also created an opportunity to teach Rebecca a lesson that could save her soul. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed Arthur's number. Marta, is everything okay? I read the letter. I said simply, tomorrow, I want to go to the bank. I need to fully understand the situation before I decide on my next steps. Of course, I'll pick you up at 9 o'clock in the morning. And Marta, your husband was an extraordinary man. What he did for you, for your family, is the deepest act of love I have seen in my 30 years as a lawyer. I barely slept that night, not from anxiety or sadness, but from a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time since Victor's death, I felt I had a clear purpose. It wasn't about getting the money back. It was about getting my daughter back. The next day, Arthur arrived at the hotel punctually. During the drive to the bank, he explained the additional details Victor had entrusted to him. Your husband began to suspect the change in Rebecca about 2 years ago, he told me as we drove through the downtown streets. That's when he started to discreetly restructure some of his assets. He wanted to ensure you were protected no matter what happened. At the bank, the personal manager, an elegant woman named Danielle, greeted us with the formality befitting accounts of that size. Mrs. Marta, I am so sorry for your loss, she said as she guided me to a private office. Your husband was a highly respected client here. And let me tell you, the provisions he made to protect you are extraordinarily intelligent. Over the next 2 hours, Danielle explained the true extent of the estate Victor had built, the additional investments, the international properties, the mutual funds that had grown silently for years. The current total, considering market fluctuations since Mr. Victor's passing, amounts to $462 million, she finally informed me. I leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Victor had achieved and, more importantly, by the complexity of the plan he had designed to protect his family. "And what about the accounts Rebecca knows about?" I asked. "Those accounts do indeed exist and contain the $300 million mentioned in the official will. However, they are subject to the clauses Mr. Arthur has already explained to you. If those clauses are activated, those funds will also revert to you automatically." We left the bank with a new perspective. I was not a helpless widow who had just lost everything. I was a woman with enough resources to change the course of this story according to my own decisions. But first, I needed to see just how far Rebecca was willing to go in her new role as a millionaire heiress, because she didn't know that every move she made was being watched by someone who held far more power than she could possibly imagine. For the next 2 weeks, I became a silent observer of my daughter's transformation. From my modest hotel room and with Arthur's discreet help, I watched as Rebecca began to show her true face to the world. The first sign came just 3 days after she threw me out. Arthur called me with a report that chilled my blood. "Marta, she fired the entire household staff," he said in a grave voice. "Maria, who had been our cook for 15 years. Elena, the housekeeper who practically watched her grow up. All of them. She gave them 1 week's severance and let them go with no more explanation than, 'I no longer need you.' Maria had called Arthur in tears, asking if she had done something wrong. This woman had prepared thousands of meals for our family, had cared for Rebecca as a child, had been like a second mother to her. And what reason did she give them?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. According to Maria, Rebecca told her that people like her no longer had a place in her new life, that she was going to hire more sophisticated staff, more in line with her new economic status. I closed my eyes and felt a pang of pain in my chest. Victor had been right. The money was revealing our daughter's true nature. And it wasn't pretty, but that was just the beginning. A week later, Arthur showed me photographs that a private investigator, hired on Victor's instructions, had taken. The images showed Rebecca emerging from luxury boutiques with shopping bags worth more than our former employees' annual salaries. She spent $150,000 in a single day, Arthur informed me as we reviewed the receipts he had legally obtained. Clothes, jewelry, shoes, things she doesn't need, just because she can buy them. But what hurt the most was a photograph of her laughing with her new friends, those superficial women who had only appeared after hearing about her inheritance. In the picture, she was wearing a gold dress that cost more than Maria's car while sipping champagne from a $1,000 bottle. "There's more," Arthur continued, his expression becoming even more serious. "Yesterday, she went to the country club where you and your husband had been members for 20 years. She canceled your membership and asked that you be removed from all records." "What?" I whispered, feeling as if I'd been punched in the stomach. "She told the manager that you were no longer relevant and that she didn't want your name associated with hers anywhere." I sat on the hotel bed and cried. Not for the club membership, but for the calculated cruelty of her actions. Rebecca wasn't just enjoying her new wealth, she was deliberately erasing my existence from her life. That afternoon, I received a call I never expected. It was Mr. Rossi, our former gardener, the man Rebecca had fired years ago for asking for a raise. "Mrs. Marta, I am so sorry to bother you during this difficult time," he said in his gentle voice, "but I need to tell you something that happened yesterday." Mr. Rossi explained that he had gone to the house to offer his condolences for Victor's death, but Rebecca had greeted him with a coldness that left him speechless. She told me that people like me had no right to be in that house. She screamed at me to leave and never come back, that the poor couldn't contaminate her new life, he recounted, his voice breaking. "Mrs. Marta, that man was like a father to me for 20 years. I cared for those gardens as if they were my own, and she treated me like I was trash." After hanging up, I sat in silence for hours. Victor had predicted this exactly. He had seen something in Rebecca that I had refused to acknowledge. An inherent cruelty that power and money were magnifying until it turned her into a monster. The next day, Arthur brought even more disturbing news. "Rebecca is planning to sell properties," he said, spreading several documents on the hotel's coffee table. "The beach house in the Hamptons where you spent your summers, the penthouse apartment downtown that your husband bought for when Rebecca went to college. She's even considering selling the office building where Victor built his empire." "Why would she sell all that?" I asked. though I suspected the answer. According to the real estate broker, she wants immediate liquidity for more exciting investments. Apparently, some new friends have convinced her to invest in businesses that promise quick returns. Over the following days, I watched from the shadows as Rebecca methodically continued to destroy everything Victor and I had built. Not just the material wealth, but also the relationships, the values, and the legacy of respect our family had maintained for decades. The last straw came exactly 3 weeks after my eviction. Arthur called me at 6 o'clock in the morning, something he would only do in an emergency. "Marta, you need to come to my office immediately," he said urgently. "Rebecca has done something that changes everything." An hour later, I was sitting at Arthur's desk, watching a video on his computer that left me breathless. In the recording, taken by the country club's security cameras, Rebecca was seen arriving at a charity gala that Victor and I had organized annually for the past 10 years. The event was continuing this year in Victor's memory, and Rebecca was expected to make a symbolic donation to maintain the family tradition. Instead, we watched her arrive with an arrogant attitude, dressed like a queen, and interrupt the event to announce that she was canceling all the donations our family had pledged. "My father is dead," we heard her say to a horrified audience, "and with him died his stupid charities. This money has better uses than being wasted on people who don't know how to appreciate it." The faces of shock and disgust in the video were palpable. These were people who had known and respected Victor for decades, who had watched Rebecca grow up, who had trusted our family. "But there's more," Arthur said, switching to another video. This happened afterward, in the parking lot. In this second recording, we saw Rebecca being confronted by Henry, an old friend of Victor's who ran one of the foundations benefiting from our donations. "Rebecca, your father would be ashamed," Henry was saying with evident sadness. "These donations help hundreds of families in need. How can you be so cruel?" Rebecca's response shattered my soul. "My father was a sentimental fool. I'm smarter than he was. Money was made to be enjoyed, not given away to losers who don't know how to work." Arthur stopped the video and looked me directly in the eye. "Marta, I think the time has come to activate the clauses of the will. Your daughter has crossed every possible line." But I had other plans. Victor had given me not only the legal tools to get everything back, but also the wisdom to understand that this wasn't just about money. It was about saving my daughter's soul before it was too late. "Not yet, Arthur," I told him with a determination I hadn't felt in weeks. "First, I'm going to give her the opportunity to face the consequences of her own actions." I didn't have to wait long to see the universe begin to collect on Rebecca's cruelty. The consequences arrived exactly 1 month after she threw me out of the house, and they came in the form she least expected, her own friends. Arthur called me one morning with news that, while giving me a bitter satisfaction, also filled me with maternal concern. "Marta, Rebecca's new investment partners have disappeared," he said in a grave tone. "They took $50 million. I sat down slowly in the chair of my hotel room, processing the information. $50 million. 1/6 of the inheritance Rebecca believed she completely controlled. "How did it happen?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. Victor always said that con artists could smell greed and inexperience from miles away. According to the private investigator who is still monitoring her activities, Rebecca met these entrepreneurs at an exclusive party 3 weeks ago. They promised to double her investment in 6 months through a European art import business. Arthur sent me the details via text as we spoke. The names of the scammers, their aliases, the fake bank accounts they had used. It had all been a sophisticated operation, specifically targeting newly rich heirs like Rebecca. "The worst part is that she signed the documents without consulting me," Arthur continued. "Apparently, she told them she no longer needed lawyers because she trusted her business instincts." That afternoon, I received a call I never thought would come. It was Rebecca. Her voice sounded different, smaller, scared. "Mom?" she whispered, and for a moment she sounded like the little girl I used to comfort when she had nightmares. "Hello, Rebecca," I replied calmly, mentally preparing myself for what was to come. I need to talk to you. Could we meet?" "Where would you like to meet?" I asked, noticing how she avoided mentioning the house. "Our house. Could you come to the house? Please." 30 minutes later, I was standing at the front door of the home where I had been happy for 40 years. Rebecca opened it immediately, as if she had been waiting by the window. She looked terrible. Her perfectly styled hair was a mess, her makeup was smudged, and she was wearing the same green dress from the day before. "Come in, please," she said, avoiding my gaze. The house was unrecognizable. The furniture Victor and I had chosen together had been replaced with cold, modern pieces. The family photographs had disappeared, replaced by expensive abstract art that had no soul. Even the smell was different, as if even the memories had been scrubbed from the air. "What happened, Rebecca?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. She collapsed onto the new sofa and began to cry. "I was scammed, Mom. I lost $50 million. Those men I trusted, they disappeared with everything." I sat beside her, fighting the maternal urge to comfort her immediately. This was the choice Victor had foreseen, and I knew I had to let it take full effect. "And what are you going to do now?" I asked gently. "I don't know. The lawyers I consulted said it's nearly impossible to recover the money. The scammers used fake identities and accounts in tax havens. Arthur refused to help me when I asked him to take the case. Of course, Arthur had refused. He knew perfectly well that this situation was part of Victor's plan to teach Rebecca about the consequences of her actions. "Rebecca, why did you call me?" I asked directly. She looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something resembling humility in her eyes, because I realized I have no one else. All those friends I thought I had vanished as soon as they heard about the lost money, and I treated all the people who truly loved me terribly. The tears flowed harder. "Especially you, Mom. What I did to you was unforgivable. I threw you out of the house right after Dad's funeral when you needed me most. I was cruel. I was horrible to you." It was the first time I had heard her take responsibility for her actions in years, but I knew we hadn't reached the bottom of this lesson yet. "And what do you expect me to do now?" I asked her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I know I don't deserve your help after what I did, but could you stay? Could you help me figure out how to get out of this mess?" I agreed to stay that night, but not in my old master bedroom. Rebecca had turned that space into her own, removing every last trace of Victor. Instead, I slept in the guest room, a constant reminder of how my status in this house had changed. Over the next few days, I watched as Rebecca struggled with the reality of her decisions. The remaining money was still a considerable fortune, but the loss had frightened her deeply. For the first time in her life, she understood that money was not infinite and that bad decisions had real consequences. "Mom, do you think Dad would be disappointed in me?" she asked one night as we ate dinner in silence. The question broke my heart because I knew Victor had foreseen this exact situation. He had loved his daughter enough to allow her to make painful mistakes if it meant she would learn crucial lessons. "Your father loved you deeply, Rebecca, but he also valued honesty, compassion, and responsibility. What do you think?" She looked down. "I think he'd be very disappointed. Not just because of the lost money, but because of how I treated people. You, Maria, Mr. Rossi, everyone who loved us for years. And what do you plan to do about it?" "I don't know if there's anything I can do. Some things can't be undone, can they?" That question showed me that she was finally beginning to understand the gravity of her actions. But the most important test was yet to come. 3 days later, the second crisis hit. Arthur called me early in the morning with news I knew would eventually arrive. "Marta, the bank is requesting audits of all the estate accounts. Apparently, someone reported suspicious movements after the scam." "What does that mean?" "It means they're going to temporarily freeze all the assets while they investigate. Rebecca will effectively be cut off from her money for at least 2 months." I hung up the phone and went upstairs to tell Rebecca. Her reaction told me everything I needed to know about whether she had truly learned anything from this experience. She was silent for several long minutes, processing the information. Then, to my surprise, her first words were not of panic or despair. "I guess this is what I deserve," she said in a calm voice. "After everything I did, after how I treated everyone, maybe it's time I learned to live like a normal person." That response gave me hope. But I knew the real test would come in the following weeks when she had to face the consequences of her actions without the safety net of her inheritance. The next 2 months were the most revealing of my daughter's life. With her bank accounts frozen and only the cash she had on hand, Rebecca was forced to confront a reality she had never experienced: financial limitation. At first, she tried to maintain her extravagant lifestyle with the credit cards and jewelry she had bought. But when the bills started piling up and payments came due, reality hit her like a cold slap. "Mom, I don't understand how this works," she told me one morning, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of bills in front of her. "These numbers don't add up. The monthly expenses for the house are higher than any normal salary." It was the first time in her life she had seen the real bills for maintaining our lifestyle. Victor and I had always handled everything, shielding her from financial responsibilities to the point of turning her into an adult who didn't know the real price of anything. "How much do you think it costs to maintain this house monthly?" I asked, genuinely curious to know if she had any concept of reality. "I don't know. $5,000? She answered uncertainly. $22,000, I said, showing her the bills for utilities, maintenance, insurance, and the cleaning staff she had hired after firing our loyal employees. Her face turned pale. $22,000 a month. And that's not including food, gas, or any personal expenses, just to keep the lights on and the house running. It was then that she truly began to understand the magnitude of her situation. Without access to the main accounts and with the fixed expenses she had created, she was running out of money fast. "What am I going to do?" she murmured. And for the first time since she was a little girl, I saw real fear in her eyes. "Well," I said calmly, "you could start by getting a job." She laughed bitterly. "A job? Mom, I don't know how to do anything. I've never worked a day in my life. Who's going to hire me?" It was a valid and painful question. Rebecca was 35 years old, with a college degree she had never used and absolutely no work experience. Victor and I had thought we were protecting her by giving her everything she needed, but in reality, we had left her completely defenseless in the real world. Over the next week, I watched as Rebecca tried to find work. Her first attempts were pathetic and revealing. She applied for management positions at prestigious companies, believing her last name and education would be enough. "They told me I need experience," she told me after her 5th failed interview. "How am I supposed to get experience if no one will give me a chance?" "Maybe you should start with something more basic," I suggested. "Something where you can learn while you work." Her pride resisted at first. The idea of working in retail or customer service seemed humiliating. But when the second overdue electricity bill arrived and the bank threatened to cut off the services, her perspective began to change. Finally, after 3 weeks of searching, she got a part-time job at a clothing boutique. The salary was $1,200 a month, an amount she used to spend in a single afternoon of shopping. "It's humiliating, Mom," she told me after her first day. "The manager is 20 years younger than me and treats me like I'm an idiot, and the customers? Some of them are so rude. And how do you feel, working?" I asked, avoiding comment on the irony that she was now experiencing the same treatment she had given others for years. "Tired," she admitted. "My feet hurt, my back hurts, and I don't understand how people do this every day for decades." But something interesting began to happen after the second week. Rebecca started to talk differently about her job and the people she met there. "There's this woman, Danielle, who works the morning shift," she told me one night. "She has 3 kids and supports her sick mother with 2 jobs. She never complains, she's never late, and she's always smiling. I don't understand how she does it." "Have you talked to her?" "A little. She told me she's been working there for 12 years. She started when she got divorced and needed to support her kids on her own." Rebecca paused, as if processing something profound. "Mom, I complained about losing $50 million, but she's probably never seen $50,000 all at once in her life, and she is so much stronger than I am." It was the first time I had heard Rebecca express genuine admiration for someone who didn't have money or social status. Victor would have been proud of this small step toward real empathy. The real turning point came a month later when Rebecca witnessed something that fundamentally changed her perspective. "Mom, something horrible happened at work today," she told me that night, clearly disturbed. "Danielle got a call from the hospital. Her youngest son was in an accident and needs an operation that costs $15,000. Her insurance doesn't cover all of it." "And what happened?" She fell apart. Completely. I've never seen someone so desperate. She told me she doesn't have that kind of money, that she'd already used all her savings on her mother's medicine, and she doesn't know what to do. Rebecca was quiet for several long minutes, and I could see her struggling internally with something. "Mom," she said finally, "I have jewelry worth more than that operation. I have dresses in my closet that cost more than Danielle's annual salary, and she has to choose between saving her son and feeding her family. What are you going to do about it?" "I want to help her," she said with determination. "I'm going to sell some of my jewelry. That diamond bracelet I bought last month for $20,000. I don't even really like it. I can sell it and give the money to Danielle." That night, while Rebecca slept, I called Arthur. "How is the plan progressing?" he asked. "Better than Victor could have hoped," I replied. "I think she's really changing. For the first time in years, I see her as the compassionate girl she used to be. Is it time to reveal the truth?" "Not yet. There's one more test she needs to pass. I need to know if this change is permanent or just temporary desperation." The next day, Rebecca did indeed sell the bracelet and gave the money to Danielle. When I saw the tears of gratitude in that hard-working woman's eyes and the look of profound satisfaction on my daughter's face, I knew we had reached a crucial point. But the universe had one final lesson prepared for Rebecca, one that not even Victor had foreseen. That same week, a letter arrived in the mail that would change everything once more. It was from a different lawyer, one representing the estate of a distant uncle of Victor's who had recently died. "Mrs. Rebecca," the letter read aloud, "we regret to inform you that Mr. Tobias Vasquez passed away last month and has named you as his sole heir. His estate is valued at approximately $75 million. Rebecca dropped the letter and looked at me with wide eyes. "$75 million more," she whispered. "After everything I've been through, after everything I've learned, the money just comes back." This was the final test. What would Rebecca do with a new fortune after having experienced relative poverty and discovered compassion? The letter about Tobias's inheritance was real, but there was a detail Rebecca didn't know. I held veto power over that inheritance, according to a family agreement Victor had established years ago. Tobias had been his younger brother, a solitary man who had always respected Victor's judgment about the family. I decided not to reveal this detail to Rebecca immediately. Instead, I wanted to see how she would react to the possibility of regaining a fortune after hitting rock bottom. Her first reaction was revealing. "I can't believe it," she murmured, rereading the letter for the 5th time. "Just when I thought I'd lost everything, when I was finally learning to live differently, this shows up." "How do you feel about it?" I asked, watching her expression carefully. "Confused," she admitted. 2 months ago, this would have been the answer to all my problems. I would have immediately run to claim the money and gone back to my old life. But now what? Now I'm not so sure I want to go back to that life." She sat on the sofa and looked out the window at the garden Mr. Rossi had tended so lovingly for years. "Mom, do you know what I discovered working at that store?" "Tell me." "I discovered that I'm capable of things I never thought I could do, that I can work for 8 hours straight, that I can solve problems, that I can help people. And for the first time in my life, when someone says thank you to me, I know I've truly earned it." Her words filled me with a hope I hadn't felt in months. This was the Rebecca that Victor and I had hoped to see emerge one day. "But I also know that $75 million could help a lot of people," she continued. "I could help Danielle, Maria, Mr. Rossi, all the people I treated so badly when I thought money made me superior to them." That night, Rebecca did something that completely surprised me. Instead of celebrating or making plans to immediately claim the inheritance, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and began to write. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm making a list," she replied without looking up. "A list of all the people I hurt, of all the things I did wrong, and of how I could use this money to make amends." For the next 2 hours, I watched her write down names, amounts, and detailed plans. Danielle and her son were on the list, of course, but so were Maria, Mr. Rossi, the charitable foundations she had defunded, and even the employees at the boutique who worked for minimum wage. "Mom, can I ask you something?" she said when she finished writing. "Of course. Do you think Dad would have forgiven me for everything I did?" The question broke my heart because I knew Victor had planned this exact moment of self-discovery and repentance. Your father loved you unconditionally, Rebecca. But more than forgiveness, he wanted you to find your way to becoming the person he knew you could be. And do you think I'm finding it? Before I could answer, the phone rang. It was Arthur, and his voice sounded urgent. Marta, I need to speak with you and Rebecca immediately. Something important has come up regarding Tobias's inheritance. What kind of something? I'd rather explain in person. Can you both come to my office tomorrow morning? I barely slept that night. I knew Arthur probably wanted to discuss my veto power over Tobias's inheritance, and that the time had come to make a crucial decision about Rebecca's future. The next day, we arrived early at Arthur's office. Rebecca was wearing her uniform from the boutique, as she had to work after the meeting. Seeing her dressed so simply, in comfortable shoes instead of designer heels, reminded me how much she had changed in these past months. Please, have a seat, Arthur said with a serious expression. Rebecca, there is something about your uncle Tobias's inheritance that you need to know. Rebecca leaned forward, attentive. Your uncle Tobias was a very wise man, and he was well aware of the situation that developed after your father's death. Before he died, he established a very specific condition for his inheritance. What kind of condition? Rebecca asked, and I could hear the anxiety in her voice. Arthur opened a folder and took out a document. The inheritance can only be claimed if your mother, Marta, certifies in writing that you have demonstrated a fundamental change in character and that you are prepared to responsibly manage a fortune of that magnitude. The silence filled the office like a dense weight. Rebecca turned to me slowly, and I saw in her eyes a mixture of understanding, surprise, and something that looked like relief. You knew about this? She asked in a soft voice. I found out last night when Arthur called me. I fibbed. This wasn't the time to reveal I had known this detail all along. And what do you think? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Do you think I've changed enough to deserve that responsibility? It was the question I had been waiting for months. The question that would determine not only Rebecca's financial future, but also the kind of person she would become for the rest of her life. Before I answer that, I said, I want to ask you a question. If I decided you weren't ready, if you lost this inheritance forever, how would you feel? Rebecca thought for several long moments before answering. 2 months ago, I would have been desperate. I would have begged. I would have promised anything. I would have made a scene. She paused and looked me directly in the eyes. But now I think I would be okay. I've learned that I can survive without millions of dollars. I've learned that I can work, that I can contribute, that I can be useful even without a family fortune. And if I tell you that you are ready, what would you do with $75 million? Without hesitation, she pulled out the notebook she had been writing in the night before. First, I would repair all the damage I did. I would compensate the people I hurt, restore the donations I canceled, and make sure that no one else suffers because of my past selfishness. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. Then, I would use the money to create real opportunities, educational scholarships, job training programs, support for single mothers like Danielle. And for you? What would be left for your personal life? Enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly. I no longer need to prove my worth by what I buy or where I live. She smiled with a warmth I hadn't seen in years. Mom, these past months taught me that true wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in the relationships you build, in the difference you make in the lives of others, in being able to look in the mirror and respect the person you see there. Arthur and I exchanged a look. It was clear that Rebecca had passed the final test. But there was still one more revelation. One that would change everything she thought she knew about the last few months of her life. Rebecca, I said, taking a deep breath before continuing, there's something else you need to know. Something your father planned from the moment he began to worry about your character. She looked at me curiously, but I could see a flash of apprehension in her eyes. Arthur, please show her the real documents, I asked the lawyer. Arthur opened another folder, much thicker than the previous one, and spread several documents across the desk. Rebecca looked at them, not immediately understanding what she was seeing. These are the documents from your father's real will, I began in a calm voice. The one your father prepared, knowing exactly what kind of reaction you would have when you believed you had inherited everything. The real will, Rebecca whispered, her face turning pale. Your father never left you the $300 million, Rebecca. Everything that has happened these past months, everything you have experienced, has been part of a carefully designed plan to save you from yourself. I then explained everything that had been hidden for months. The clause that returned the inheritance to me if she demonstrated cruelty, the existence of additional accounts that I controlled, and the reality that I had never truly lost my position as the primary heir. I knew what was happening all along, I continued, watching her eyes fill with tears of understanding. I just wanted you to learn. You mean? Her voice broke. I mean, your father loved you so much that he was willing to make you believe you had lost his love in order to save you. And I was willing to let you throw me out of the house, to treat me cruelly, to despise me, because I knew it was the only way you would discover who you truly wanted to be. Rebecca completely broke down. It wasn't the desperate cry of someone who had lost money, but the deep sob of someone who finally understood the magnitude of the love she had received without realizing it. Dad knew I would become a monster, and still he found a way to save me. And you endured all my venom knowing you could stop me at any moment. Your father wrote in his letter that the goal was never to punish you, but to save you. And I was willing to endure anything if it meant getting my daughter back. Arthur handed us a box of tissues and waited patiently as Rebecca processed all the information. So the $50 million I lost to the scammers? She asked through her sobs. That was real, Arthur replied. That part wasn't planned. Your father had put that amount in accounts you could actually use, hoping you would make financial mistakes that would teach you valuable lessons. The scammers simply accelerated that process. And Uncle Tobias's inheritance? Also real, I told her. But as you now know, it was conditional on my approval. Your Uncle Tobias was part of your father's plan from the beginning. Rebecca was silent for several long minutes, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she looked up at me with an expression that was a mixture of pain, gratitude, and something that looked like awe. Mom, can you forgive me? She whispered. Not just for these last few months, but for years of being selfish, cruel, and blind to everything you and Dad did for me. I've already forgiven you, Rebecca. I forgave you from the very first day because I knew the daughter I raised was still in there, somewhere beneath all that bitterness and greed. And now what? She asked. What happens with all the money, with the real inheritance? I took out a document I had prepared the night before with Arthur's help. I've decided to divide everything equally between us, I told her, but with specific conditions. Your portion will be in a trust, jointly managed by the two of us. Every major financial decision will have to be made together, and a significant portion must be designated for charitable causes and for repairing the damage you caused. If you don't accept these conditions, then you will receive a fixed sum to live comfortably, but you will not have access to the main fortune. The decision is yours. Rebecca didn't hesitate for a second. I accept all the conditions. She stood up from her chair and walked to the window. Mom, during these past months, I learned something I never understood before. Money only has value if you know how to use it to do good. Without that wisdom, it's just paper that corrupts your soul. And what about your job at the boutique? I'm going to keep working there, she answered with determination. At least for a while longer. Danielle and the other women have become my real friends, not like those leeches who used to surround me. And I like the feeling of earning my salary, however small it may be. Arthur began to prepare the official documents while Rebecca and I discussed the next steps. But there was one more conversation we needed to have. Rebecca, there's something I need to ask you, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course, are you doing all of this change in attitude because you've truly changed, or because you now know that I control the money? It was the most important question, the one that would determine if everything we had been through had been worth it. Rebecca reflected carefully before answering. 2 hours ago, when I thought I was dependent on your approval to get Uncle Tobias's inheritance, I had already decided that even if you denied me that inheritance, I would keep trying to be a better person, not for the money, but because I finally like the person I'm starting to become. She came to me and took my hands in hers. Mom, these months of working, of struggling, of meeting real people with real problems, taught me something that 35 years of privilege never could. That true wealth comes from the relationships you build and the good you do in the world. The money is just a tool to achieve that. And you're sure you won't go back to being the person you were before? I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, she admitted honestly. But I can promise that I will never again forget the lessons I learned these past months. And if I ever start to stray, I hope you'll stop me again. That afternoon, we signed all the necessary documents. Rebecca officially became the co-owner of a fortune that now amounted to over $500 million, including the inheritance from Tobias and the investments that had grown during the months of crisis. But more important than any amount of money was what we had recovered: our relationship as mother and daughter, and the opportunity to use our wealth to make a real difference in the world. When we left Arthur's office, Rebecca surprised me with an unexpected request. "Mom, could we go visit Mr. Rossi? I want to apologize to him personally and offer him not only his job back, but the chance to expand the gardens and maybe start a training program for other gardeners." As we walked to the car, I reflected on the miracle I had witnessed. Victor had been right from the beginning. Sometimes, to save someone you love, you have to be willing to let them hit rock bottom, to let them learn from their mistakes, to let them discover for themselves the value of what's important. But there was still one final surprise, something not even Victor had foreseen, and it would change our perspective on this entire experience. 3 months after our reconciliation, while we were organizing the first annual meeting for the foundation we had established in Victor's memory, a letter arrived that would forever change our understanding of this whole experience. It was from a notary in New York, informing us of a safe deposit box that Victor had kept secret for years. The box could only be opened after certain specific conditions were met. That Rebecca had worked for her own money for at least 3 months, that she had genuinely helped someone in need, and that mother and daughter had signed official documents of reconciliation. "Dad really did think of everything," Rebecca murmured, as we read the letter together. "He even had plans for after we learned the lessons." We traveled to New York that same week. At the bank, an employee led us to an underground vault where a medium-sized metal box was waiting. When we opened it, we found something neither of us expected. In addition to some extra financial documents, there was a collection of letters, all written by Victor during the last 2 years of his life. Dated and numbered letters, addressed to specific moments in our family's healing process. The first letter was marked, "For when Rebecca has learned the value of work." "My dearest daughter," Rebecca read aloud, tears streaming down her cheeks. "If you are reading this, it means you have discovered something I always knew was inside you. The capacity to be strong, independent, and compassionate. Work is not a punishment. It is a gift that connects you to your own ability and dignity." The second letter was addressed to me. "For Marta, the bravest woman I know, my eternal love," I read in a trembling voice. "Thank you for being strong when I could not be. Thank you for loving our daughter enough to let her make painful mistakes. I know these months have been the hardest of your life, but I also know you are the only person in the world capable of guiding Rebecca back to her true heart." But the letter that impacted us the most was the last one, marked, "For when mother and daughter are truly family again. My two loves," it began. "If you are reading this together, it means the miracle I hoped for really happened. Rebecca, you have discovered that true wealth is not in what you possess, but in what you give. Marta, you have proven once again that true love sometimes requires the greatest courage, to let go in order to regain. But there is something else you need to know," the letter continued, "something I kept secret even from Arthur until this moment. For the last 5 years, I have been silently donating millions of dollars to charitable organizations around the world. I didn't do it through our family foundation because I wanted it to be completely anonymous." Rebecca and I looked at each other in amazement as I kept reading. "I have secretly paid for the college education of over 500 low-income students. I have funded 3 hospitals in rural areas of Mexico and Colombia. I have established funds for single mothers, child nutrition programs, and shelters for victims of domestic violence. I did all of this without telling you because I wanted to be sure that when you took control of our fortune, it would be for the right reasons." The letter explained that Victor had donated nearly $100 million over those years, but he had structured the donations so that they would continue automatically after his death if we proved we were ready to carry on his legacy. The real value of our family estate, including scheduled donations and future commitments, is $650 million, the letter revealed. But it comes with the greatest responsibility you can imagine. To use this wealth to change lives, not just to live comfortably. At the end of the letter, there were specific instructions on how to continue the charitable programs Victor had established. Contacts for the organizations that had been receiving anonymous donations, and a detailed plan to expand these efforts over the next 20 years. P.S. The letter ended. In this box, you will also find the deeds to a house in each of the places where we have helped: Mexico, Colombia, and 3 cities in the United States. They are not for you to use as vacation homes, but as centers of operation to personally oversee the impact of your donations. I want you to meet the families you are helping, to see directly how your decisions change real lives. Rebecca and I sat in silence for several long minutes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Victor had been doing in secret and the responsibility that now fell to us. "Mom," Rebecca finally said, "do you realize what this means?" "It means your father wasn't just teaching us about money and character," I replied. "He was preparing us to become stewards of a legacy that goes far beyond our family." In the following weeks, we began contacting the organizations Victor had been secretly supporting. Each conversation revealed new dimensions of his quiet generosity. Orphanage directors who didn't know how to thank the anonymous angel who had saved their institutions. Mothers who had been able to feed their children thanks to the programs he funded. Students who had graduated from college without knowing who had paid for their education. "It's overwhelming," Rebecca confessed to me one night as we reviewed the impact reports from the donations. "Dad helped thousands of people without ever expecting recognition or gratitude. How can we live up to that example?" "We don't have to live up to it immediately," I answered. "We just have to start, one step at a time, one family at a time." We decided to begin by visiting the centers Victor had established. Our first trip was to a hospital in a rural part of Colombia that he had fully funded. Seeing the doctors saving lives with equipment our money had provided, meeting the families who had received free treatment, was an experience that fundamentally changed our perspective on what it meant to be wealthy. "This is what Dad wanted us to understand," Rebecca told me as she held a baby who had been born healthy thanks to an incubator we had donated. "Money isn't a prize we won. It's a tool we've been entrusted with to do God's work on earth." A year after our reconciliation, we officially established the Victor Vasquez Foundation, with Rebecca as the executive director and me as the chair of the board. Rebecca had left her job at the boutique, but kept her friendships with Danielle and the other women she had met there. In fact, several of them now worked for our foundation, using their real-life experiences to identify and help families in need. "You know what's the strangest part of all this?" Rebecca asked me during the inauguration of our 10th Educational Scholarship Program. "What's that?" "I am happier now, working 14 hours a day to help others, than I ever was when I could buy anything I wanted." Dad was right. True happiness comes from knowing your life has a purpose greater than yourself. That night, as we reviewed applications for our new microloan program for single mothers, I reflected on the extraordinary journey we had been on. Victor had orchestrated not only the salvation of his daughter's soul, but the complete transformation of our family into something far more powerful and meaningful than we had ever been. "Mom," Rebecca said, as we stamped our approval on 50 new loans, "do you think Dad would be proud of us?" I looked at my daughter, who had gone from being a selfish and cruel heiress to a woman dedicated to changing the world one family at a time. I thought of Victor, of his incredibly complex plan to save us all, of his faith that love and wisdom could triumph over greed and selfishness. "I think your father knew exactly what we would become," I answered. "And I think right now, wherever he is, he's smiling because his plan not only worked, but it surpassed even his most optimistic expectations." Rebecca smiled and continued working. Outside, the city slept, oblivious to the fact that in this modest office, 2 women were working late into the night, planning how to use a fortune to change the world. He didn't save her with money. He saved her by teaching her how to save herself. And in the process, we discovered that the real fortune had never been our financial wealth, but the infinite capacity of the human heart to transform pain into compassion, selfishness into generosity, and loss into purpose. And Victor, my dear Victor, had known this all along.